Should I go? Oh, okay, awesome. Well, hello, people. Oh, wait, hold up. I should be like, oh, didn't see you there. No. um, yes, as it says up here, and as you've probably heard before, my name is Austin Akers. Okay, James Bond reference, or Akers, Austin Akers. Okay, um, and today I'm going to give you a brief history. It'll be brief. Don't worry. Okay, it's not some CLA licensing, agreement. Okay, type brief. Okay, I promise you, this will actually be brief. Okay, all right. Okay. So take that talk, divide it by like maybe 2, all right? Maybe 3, all right? If we're lucky, we'll divide that by 3. And that will be the length of this talk, okay? So today I'm going to give you all a brief history. I didn't have slides, but that's okay. But I'm going to give you all a brief history of actually my open source origin story. So to start off, give you a quick background. Again, I've been programming for about, I guess, 7.5 years. Started early. I took a permanent vacation from college my sophomore year. It wasn't PTO, it was just, time off, TO, okay? Just I wasn't paid to drop out. Okay. So yes, I took that permanent vacation, started going into software development more. Started I was part of the startup community at the time in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Dallas, Texas. Did a lot of random things, a lot of fun things, did a lot of volunteer work. And then slowly over the time or whatever, as jobs became, I started going more into more and more full-time roles. Early in my career, it's funny enough, startup world is really cool. You build quickly, but you build and you fail rapidly, and it's amazing. Only downside to that is that most startups try to get you with equity, and unfortunately, you cannot eat equity. So, I was on that dollar menu quite a bit. Those McChickens were pretty fire. Okay, so there was an extended amount of time where things were kind of rough, right? Even with like applying to jobs and everything like that. But eventually, was able to land a full-time 40-hour contract role that paid me well. And then unfortunately, certain things happened in terms of company restructuring. Different company went really well. Things are very great. Same thing sort of happened to that one. There was a whole pattern. Don't worry, I did phenomenal work. Okay, I did phenomenal work. They still love me. Everyone up there at all those companies still love me. They even message me till this day. So great work, great people. Just again, business profitability. Okay. So, but aside from that, eventually started making my way through the software development world of getting, going into larger and larger companies. And eventually I landed a role as a senior software engineer at a company called Allstate. Now, if you've all heard of Allstate, anyone here familiar with that? The Good Hands company, that logo. Okay. And this is actually where I became substantially more involved in open source, right? So fun fact, this is also around the same time, if you're all familiar with this, I'm just going to say this very clear, okay? I am not promoting anything such as cryptocurrency like that, but I started becoming a lot more involved in the blockchain world, okay? I know when we think of blockchain, it's synonymous with cryptocurrency. Please don't think about that all the time, okay? But I started becoming a lot more involved in open source. And one project in particular, I started getting involved with, and this is sort of my open source origin story, was a company called MetaMask. So anyone here familiar with that at all? No? Oh, one person. Wow, okay. One person. Okay. And it all actually started at a conference called TruffleCon 2019, which actually was held at, I think, the Building 33, which the conference center or something like that. So they had like this company called Consensus. You can think of Consensus as like like the alphabet for a series of different companies, so like an umbrella company called Consensus. They had a conference around this around blockchain tooling, and so it was for this company called Truffle, and TruffleCon, right? So tooling around blockchain, building out smart contracts, compiling things, and this all happened in 2019 when I was at Allstate. So I went there for a conference, slept on my brother-in-law's couch because I did not want to pay for a hotel. Okay, one of my own expense and own dime, and actually, where I really started becoming heavily involved was this project called MetaMask Docs. So, fun fact is, at TruffleCon, I was sitting down with a group of my friends, and we were like, we get randomly approached by this like developer and amazing person. She was saying like, hey, if there's one thing you can do, or if one thing you can change about, like, let's say insert project, which is MetaMask, what would it be? For me, I was like, I don't know. And then my friend was like, well, which could change is documentation. I'm like, oh yeah, the documentation, right? Because at that time, the documentation wasn't really well maintained. And so she was like, huh, interesting, I'll take that. And I actually said back, and I thought to myself, I'm like, instead of me asking you all to improve that, why don't I go and try to do that myself? And she was like, okay, go ahead and do whatever you want to do. Yeah, I mean, not like in a bad way, but like, a lot of people say a lot of things and not very many people execute on it. And so we went to a boba tea shop, down the street, and I sat down after the conference that day, and I started cracking on like the actual of like a scaffold of the newer MetaMask documentation. So I actually used something called what was it called ViewPress, and started building out a new version of their documentation. And so that was really fun and really interesting. And then about 2 or 3 months later, this is August of 2019. I think it was either November or December of 2019. I actually deployed on Netlify a version of that actually to them and say, hey y'all, I redid your entire documentation. Here it is. And they were just like, wait, holy crap, like what? Okay. And that's kind of how I got started on contributing to open source. And so if we take a look here, I'll actually go here. Let me see if I can find this. Contributors. Oh wow, look at that. I'm still up there. You'll see this. It's loading. Hang tight. ... It's there. Okay. I got started actually in contributing to this project called MetaMask, which is like an Ethereum wallet. Here it is. Boom. There we go. So you'll see here, like around that time. Huh? Oh yeah, no. Around that time or whatever. And this is me, like, again, saying, like, I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to build your documentation, like a crazy person. And I started heavily contributing to a really popular Ethereum open source project called MetaMask. And I just contributed to the developer documentation. And over time, eventually they released it, and that was like the newer version. Now there's an even newer version they just recently released. But that's kind of how I got started, right? Which was actually documentation. It was really interesting. And the reason why I say that is where sometimes when we think about contributing to open source, like, we always think about, oh man, I have to contribute to like a project that like the core part of a project. In reality, one thing that's very important that I think a lot of people don't realize is that documentation is the other 50% of the project that most people sort of push to the side, right? It's the other 50%. And the reason why I say that is because why developer documentation is very important is because if you're a developer, how many here have like built something in like, let's say React, right? You've gone to maybe the React documentation. Sure, you can go through tutorials, but you've gone to the React documentation, right? And you can have the most basic, maybe the most like frameworks. There's some really frameworks out there, but their documentation is absolutely phenomenal. And the reason why is because that's where developers actually interface. If they're very unsure of something, they go to the documentation, right? And I kind of think about that as, again, the other 50% of that product. And so when I went through and rebuilt this, right, I thought about in the sense of me as a developer, how can I easily make this accessible for every individual who wants to learn about building and extending off of something like an Ethereum project. And so that's essentially, I guess, open source, like, contributions, like my origin story. This is a really simplified origin story. As I said, y'all, this is not a licensing agreement talk, okay? That's sort of what happened, which then led me down the avenue of contributing to something even greater, which was where's that back button? I don't use Safari much. Oh, there it is. Okay, there it is. Which then led me to contributing to their, building out a simple decentralized app, and then also the MetaMask extension, which is the Ethereum blockchain enabled like websites, whatever extension that it allows you to be able to interact with decentralized applications and whatnot, right? And so the documentation, MetaMask documentation, was the avenue that allowed for me to contribute to or the documentation was the avenue for me to be able to contribute to MetaMask, right? And then eventually I kind of had other contributions. I was like on this contributing to documentation, like sort of like this really cool like code high where I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to contribute to more documentation. And eventually I started contributing to a project called Beautify.js, right? And more specifically around that, I contributed to like their beginner developer guide. So writing out articles on saying, hey, what exactly is this, right? Things like what's tree shaking? How to build out something using, let's say, the actual component framework of Beautify, right? I've also done some contributions to View Router as well. A couple, that was fun. Kind of hard, okay, but really fun. But in terms of open source contributions, again, documentation. And man, I really wish I had slides on this one. But yeah, like, I think, more than anything, I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's really not much really to say other than the fact that this is my origin story. But again, kind of going back to what I stated prior to this, right? In terms of contributing to projects. Whenever you think about contributing to open source, try not to just think about it from just code. There's many individuals who've done things from advocacy, right? Doing presentations, building out projects, building out tutorials, right? For a lot of these open source projects that you see nowadays, right? And if you're ever curious about how to contribute, right? What you could do, certain things that something I did, right, was interacting with the maintainers, messaging people saying, hey, you know what? I saw that there may not be a lot of tutorials on this insert project, or hey, I wrote an article that was actually tailored around this really cool open source project. I'd love to collaborate with you all, right? Or I'd love to figure out ways to help not only benefit getting, advocating and just benefiting the project, but also the people around who are also consuming the project as well too. So in terms of building out an open source, right? Finding your own open source origin story itself, think about the different avenues you can actually go about helping, right? Again, I talk about governance. I think I said that briefly before, right? Governance, right? You can help in terms of being sort of could be a project manager, right? You don't have to just code all the time. You can help manage the project itself, right? Everything from saying, hey, let's look at what do releases look like, right? What are we going to prioritize? Working with maintainers to understand what are we going to prioritize this set, for this version, right? And also looking at as well too, like tagging things. So what's really interesting when you look at a lot of these different, I'll even go here, right? When we look at issues here, you'll see there's 1.8K issues, and some of them are also deprecated, but actually doing these tagging, right? Oh, what type of issue is this? Is it a bug? Is this a good first issue? Boom, here's a good first issue, right, for people. So actually having these things, tagging this, because this is another avenue in terms of governance and maintenance that maintainers have to actually deal with, right? A lot of maintainers are stretched thin because you're wearing multiple hats, right? Not only do you have to build out that library itself and fix the bugs on that, you have to also build out the documentation. You have to also build out tutorials and how-tos, right? All that different stuff. And then on top of that, you have to deal with, you have to also do things like, oh, well, let me build out conference talks. Let me also do a lot of different stuff. And again, you think about that even as one person. If writing codes a lot, thinking about how having to do all those other things can be very overwhelming, and the ball can be dropped. All right, it can be as simple as Apollo did earlier, saying, hey, my first contribution can come from doing literally fixing fixing a word or something like that, right? It's doing very simple documentation edits. And that's actually how in many situations I also got started as well too, right? So when we talk about open source origin stories, mine started from documentation, from a very small edit, to then me kind of taking the extreme and redoing it, from the ground up. You probably don't want to do that. Check with the maintainers. That was just a very special use case, okay? A very special case, that particular reason. But yeah, again, find your avenue. Do whatever works for you. Figure that out, and remember that open source isn't just something that is just I have to be the best engineer. I need to figure out how to contribute to this core project in that sense. There's many other avenues, and just being aware of that and finding your own rhythm of doing that. So that's that. So that is an open source story, my little origin story, and my advice to you all. So boom. Now, any questions? Any questions at all? No? Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, okay. Oh, okay. Wait. Yes. So I will state that for me specifically, because I've been such a consistent open source contributor, eventually to being one of the maintainers, there are different avenues that I've gone about communicating. So for example, for the MetaMask docs, there is an actual open source Slack channel, right? Specifically for me communicating with them in terms of my open source contributions. Outside of that, just to improve the overall communication, me just getting responses back, or whatever, being able to message people directly, and sometimes even Discord as well. So open source projects typically have a Discord group, or even a Slack group or something, a Slack channel or something along those lines, or I guess Slack org, I don't know, Slack group, something like that. Yeah. And they have channels and those avenues of actually communicating more. So, but when you're first starting off, more than likely, it could be a mixture of both depending upon the project. But typically you want to communicate initially through the actual channels as well too, of via GitHub. Sometimes I have actually emailed contributors directly. So they may have their email. Mine is not there. I know. I promise you I'm really nice. Okay. I'm a very, people send me LinkedIn messages. It's not hard to get in contact with me, even Twitter DMs as well too, right? But I have DM'd maintainers. I've, emailed maintainers as well too, figuring out different avenues of communicating with them, saying, hey, I really want to contribute. I want to do something here, right? And then being very open to that, right? And just sticking to it. But typically starting off, what I've experienced in the past, GitHub under your PRs and stuff like that has been or under issues as well, has been the typical way that I've gone about and when starting off initially, figuring out ways to contribute. So yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Oh. Oh. Yeah. Oh, open source projects. So actually, it is goodfirstissue.dev. So this is a great project. I mean, Free Code Camp, they do have some good stuff there, but that's more like, again, like it's its own little bit. But I'd say good first issues. When you're wanting to get started with the project, obviously you want to find what a good first issue is, sort of that entry point. So goodfirstissue.dev is one of them, and I think also not Fist, first issue. There's good first issues or goodfirstissues.com and then goodfirstissue.dev. Um, so this is also another one as well too. You can sort by programming languages, filter by issue label, and also filter by repository. So goodfirstissue.dev and then also goodfirstissues.com. Okay, I know. Yeah, very confusing. Okay, but also what you could do as well is kind of what Apollo stated. You can go to explore. What you could do is you can go inside a project that you may find to be really intriguing. You're like, wow, well, I want to contribute to this right here. You can go to issues, and then you can let's see, go to labels, and you can filter by the labels that they have here, right? So I'm gonna filter. There should typically there it is. Boom. Filter by label good first issue. Now be nice. Try not to take up all the good first issues. Okay, there's other people who might want to contribute. So try not to take up like 10 of them. I'm like, I'm gonna do all 10 first good issues. I'm like, come on, let's be. But being aware of that, right? But this is a great way to start. So going to a repository, looking at it saying, oh wow, like it could be React, it could be Rust, it could be C++, could be Swift, and just finding out what are those good first issues, that you can label by, and just, going from there, right? And if you're still unsure, again, those two websites are really great. And yeah, if you do find yourself trying to crank out a good first issue, try to build up from there, right? Good first issues are great for you to find sort of like that, pigeonhole yourself and like get like that one bit of the code base where you're just like, wow, I just became familiar with this, right? And expand upon that knowledge to help better understand the entirety of that project. So if you do it, sure, you can go through. I know a lot of people try to do the whole like, I'm just gonna get my name on this project, contribute as a good first issue, and then go to the next one, go to the next project, go to the next project. Try to actually dedicate yourself and say, hey, you know what, I'm gonna contribute to this project or two projects, right? And I'm gonna try to build out my knowledge and try to take out more issues as well too, more complicated issues. And that from there helps not only just the maintainers and helps you develop a relationship with them, but also helps out the project in general and takes more off of their plate. So yeah. Any other questions? You're welcome. I think we're good. No? Any other questions at all? Wow. Oh my gosh, this is great. Okay, sweet. Yeah, I told you it was going to be brief. Thank you. Sweet.